Hello and welcome to Film 2251, The Art of Adaptation. My name is Mohsen Nasrin, and today's lecture is about transnational culture of film adaptation. When producers become interested in adapting literary works of other nations, they definitely see certain aspects of those works translatable between these two cultures as well as two different media forms. Hollywood was always interested in adapting prestigious literary works from other cultures. For example, British Victorian novels, Russian modern novels, great works of French literature like Les Miserables, or even in terms of American novels, sometimes directors from other countries were invited to direct those films like Brokeback Mountain or One Fly Over Cuckoo's Nest. This is definitely not unique to Hollywood. American novels were used in the films of other cultures. We are going to watch a movie called Salesman that constantly refers to death of a salesman as a counterpoint to its narrative in this course. This aspect of the theories of adaptations are tied to our last week's lecture, and that was the idea of political motifs in adaptations. For example, the article by Anne-Marie Schultz assigned for this week is discussing how Orson Welles' interest in criticism of fascism is evident in his adaptations of Franz Kafka's The Trial, as well as in the ways he modified the story for his purposes. So, an important step in this act of, I would say, translation is the idea of reworking and familiarizing it to the local culture that is being produced. For example, Iranian filmmakers in the 90s adapted Western novels such as Franny and Zoe or Dollhouse into Iranian settings. In this film, Sarah Merjoui presents a new design for Ibsen's Dollhouse. What is interesting about this film, based on the play by a Norwegian writer, is that it becomes believable in the Iranian context and for the Iranian viewers. Consequently, the director's interpretation of this work and his political motive in adapting these texts in contemporary Iranian society is more important than his loyalty to the original text. At the same time that the adapter should understand the worldview of the work, and in case of Ibsen's Dollhouse is always interpreted as a proto-feminist text, it should also work within the mechanism of the dominant ideology of the society when the text is going to be adapted. And through this awareness, Merjoui was able to create this intercultural dialogue.
خب چرا پدرتون نخواستین خودش امضا کنه؟
واسه این که درست نبود. بابا سخت مریض بودم. من که تو اون وضعها نمیتونستم بهش بگم مامان میخوام چیکار کنم. جون خودش بیشتر در خطر بود.
So the storyline and the design, the set design of the film, you see the carpets in the background, they are all become subject to cultural changes. And this changing and appropriation of the character to the sociocultural context when the film is being made is necessary. So Nora is the female lead of A Dollhouse by Henrik Ibsen, and Mercury chose the name Sarah, something similar but Iranianized. So one might ask why, despite these cultural differences, the filmmaker should decide to use this European play as the main source of his work. Because the director realizes a universal theme that both the Iranian characters and the character of Nora in the Norwegian play would share with each other. In the play, the collapse of equality and justice between men and women is depicted, as well as women's social alienation. And the Nora's character, although she's coming from a noble family, she is regarded as non human by her husband and the society. And this is important. This is something that has resonance in Iranian society as well. Both Nora and Sora's realization that they live with someone stranger understanding the wrong rules of the society. Choosing a play that is based on individualism and even changing the name of the play to the name of the character, Sarah. So it is an individual name for a society that is under political repression. Focusing on an individual person in itself should be seen as a resistance to the dominant modes of power exercises. So what we see here is a form of cultural indigenization, and it's not something that only happens in movies. There are theatrical adaptations of William Shakespeare's Othello into African setting in a way that subversion of the idea of an African man going into England is evident in such theatrical adaptations. For example, this film Maya Memsab is an example of cultural indigenization of translating a famous novel, Madame Bovary, into an Indian setting. So in these adaptations, a colonial novel or a Western novel is used, but certain themes of political incorrectness or the idea of being silenced about something in colonial literature, for example, the practice of slavery, is subverted by appropriating the novel into a very different setting, the setting of the oppressed. So the carriage from Gustav Flaubert's novel has been changed to train in this process of indigenization of this literary work. So we see examples of intercultural dialogues between Europe and its others. In the case of the movie that is assigned for this week, Trial is the Americanizations of a European novel. And in the other two examples discussed, we saw the non-European influence of such works. For example, how these texts were adapted in Iran or India. So the famous stories of colonialism is not just going to be read or narrated by a colonialist director. So this book, Madame Bovary, is adapted by Renoir, a famous French filmmaker. It's adapted by Woody Allen, and we just watched a short clip of the Bollywood version of Madame Bovary. The book has also been adapted by different other European and American filmmakers. So the French novel has been subjectified by different filmmakers from different nationalities. So for this week, please read the reading, and it is about how the movie Trial, this Americanized version of Kafka's novel, is stressing on the idea of resistance more than uh, how this theme is played in the original novel. What Kafka meant for European readers, what it meant for young American filmmaker Orson Welles. How Kafka's criticism of bureaucratic government has been translated by an American filmmakers, one that was written prior to the Second World War, an adaptation 2 decades after the rise of fascism in Europe.